Hey, I'm live. I'm just waiting for it to start on my main delayed reaction. Delayed reaction. Great. Hello. Um, I'm just checking on some things. Okay, we're good. So, whoa. Okay. So today we're getting closer and closer to the eclipse. It's now just over 3 weeks away. Um, yeah, I've been thinking about this eclipse for a while, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But today I'm going to talk about what I'm planning on doing, specifically with my family, and kind of some general thoughts sprinkled in about how I'm going about this. I touched on the gear that I'm bringing last week and other videos, but if you have questions, just let me know. Now, getting right into it, this isn't, as the saying goes, this isn't my first rodeo. I've seen a few other eclipses, both, of course, partial and total, and so I figured we'd go back in time just very quickly. This is the origin of where it all started. This photo of me as a teenager in a bygone era, that was my first eclipse. It was a partial solar eclipse. It was annular. It took a similar path to the one last fall. It was in the 80s. And I was already kind of into astronomy. You can see I had two telescopes there. Solar eclipse glasses were not a thing as far as I know back then, but I actually had gotten my hands on an eclipse filter, a glass filter, which you can see on the telescope in the foreground. And because it was kind of difficult to otherwise monitor the eclipse or watch the eclipse, I kind of rigged up something where I had eyepiece projection onto an easel, and then I had to have it shaded. But it was a pretty deep partial eclipse in Houston, and that's kind of what got my kind of piqued my interest in eclipses. And eclipses can be calculated centuries into the future. And so, like, here's a list of kind of eclipses of the 21st century. But you can, they're computed way in advance, and they tend to be kind of scattered about the globe. So a lot of times they're in relatively remote areas. Now, when I was a teenager in the 80s, I had kind of penciled in some eclipses that in the future that I had wanted to go to. Two of them in the 90s, in 91 and in 99. And I think I was kind of aware of the 2017 and 2024 eclipses, the one this year, but it was kind of hard to think about as a teenager. But as it was, I ended up going to an eclipse when I was almost 30 that I had first discovered when I was a teenager. So I'm not so obsessed that I have flown to like incredibly remote areas, but it was enough of an obsession that I kind of had thought about it way in advance. So as far as like my plans for this go round and kind of my plans in general, my main goal is to be able to see it, to experience it, to bring my family along. That's my number one goal. I think I mentioned this last week. My secondary goal is to get a lot of photos of totality, and kind of my tertiary goal is to get videos. But ultimately, kind of based on experience and just kind of knowing how these things go, if there's one word to describe everything or the way I think about it, is flexibility. I kind of have, a rough idea of, the path of where it's going to, the eclipse is going to be going. So you can kind of, see. Now I'm going to be mostly focusing on Texas because that's where I'm planning on seeing it, but you can kind of see the path. So I start with kind of a rough idea of where the path is going to be, and and then I kind of go from there. Now, as an aside, if you're not on the path of totality and you're not planning on going going to the path of totality, and you just are kind of curious what the percentage is going to be, because it's going to be across I think all 50 states are going to get some aspect of it, or at least all of the continental US will. But like basically I put in Houston here, and you can see 94% is how deep the eclipse will be here, which is deeper than it was in that 1980s photo, and also the deeper than it was in just a few months ago, the partial eclipse. So it's going to be pretty impressive across broad swaths of America. You won't see totality, but I'll include a link to this in the description after the video. So kind of I won't go into the full reasons, but like I wasn't as prepared as I would have liked to have been in some of those earlier eclipses I had seen. But so again, this will all kind of boil down to weather. So for example, in 2017, the eclipse was August 21st, and totality didn't go over Houston. So I knew I would have to drive at least to St. Louis because we weren't near the center line. And I'd been watching the weather, and it was cloudy in Missouri. And so I kind of hedged my bets. And the night before, I drove up to Oklahoma City. Now, one thing you run into is, so I'm just going to talk about anecdotal things that have been my experience. Like this was definitely the experience also in 99. If you're trying to get hotel accommodations like on the center line, you're probably not going to. Those probably booked out like a year, months, or if not years ahead of time. And so, but if you're outside of the center line, you still have availability, so, typically. So we ended up driving up to Oklahoma City because I was hoping that it would clear. I had been watching the weather the few days leading up to the eclipse, and Missouri didn't look good. But I still didn't want to drive farther than I had to. So we drove up to Oklahoma City 2 nights before the eclipse, or the night, 2 nights before. And Missouri, like it was basically, if Missouri cleared, we just drive a short distance to the east and we'd be fine. As it turned out, I believe it was raining. So we kind of I looked at the eclipse path, and we kind of headed to the northwest. So we from Oklahoma, we went into Colorado and then into Wyoming. And we ended up getting into Wyoming the night before. And like I say, everything is sold out. So we were in Casper, Wyoming. And I'm just kind of mentioning this as kind of how you end up improvising. We ended up spending the night, and I kind of had anticipated this. I'll get into that in a moment. But we ended up spending the night in a Walmart parking lot, along with, you can kind of see in the photo, the parking lot is full. This is in Casper, Wyoming at like 6 a.m. It's like thousands of people, RVs. It was kind of insane. Luckily, it was a 24-hour Walmart, and there were people going in all night long. I saw people walking out with pillows because they weren't anticipating having to sleep in their car. But I kind of so we had brought pillows. We have a minivan, and I ended up bringing an inflatable mattress that we inflated in the back of the minivan. So that was, it's kind of like anticipating it. Now, it's not like we were really roughing it, but, it's just something to kind of think of contingencies. And speaking of contingencies, as we were coming into Wyoming, and I'll get into this more a little bit later as well, traffic. I think the population of Wyoming technically doubled the day of the eclipse. There's like over 500,000 people in Wyoming, but I think over 500,000 people showed up just for the eclipse in 2017. So the good thing is people didn't show up all at the same time. But there was traffic on the interstates going in to like through Cheyenne and Casper. We ended up showing up kind of after some of that had cleared, but that's something if you're traveling like around the eclipse near the center line, that's something to definitely give extra time for. So we ended up kind of waking up that morning, and there was a park that we ended up driving to that morning. And I'm just kind of mentioning this because it kind of shows you, or it's kind of like, it's that whole improvisation. Hi, Allison. Welcome. So it's about kind of improvising, having, being flexible and whatever. So anyway, we ended up at this park, and there were like thousands of other people. There were a lot of people scattered about Casper, Wyoming. A funny postscript about that whole trip. So we saw the eclipse. It was great. It was really nice. There were some high clouds, broken clouds, but none of it interfered with the eclipse. But kind of a funny postscript to that after the trip. So it was interesting. Everybody takes off after totality, or most people take off. And so we actually spent the night in Casper, Wyoming. They had plenty of availability that night of the eclipse because people had left. And then since we had driven, from Texas all the way up to Wyoming, it wasn't that much. It was a few hundred miles to the east was Mount Rushmore. So I had never been to South Dakota before, so we went and saw Mount Rushmore and then kind of drove back down kind of through the center, through Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, skipped Kansas, and then back into Texas. But the timing, it was just kind of crazy. Just quick aside, it was a quick postscript to that whole thing. Hurricane Harvey was making landfall south of Houston around that time, and we're driving back, and we see this sign: travels the Texas coast discouraged, up in Dallas, like 200 miles to the north. Not what you want to be seeing when you're trying to, it's like the high of the eclipse, and then you're kind of like, this isn't good. And there was like a mass evacuation of like the coastal areas. But anyway, so that was kind of an adventure after an adventure. So now that was 2017. So now this year, the good thing is, for the most part, the path is going over. I keep doing that. The path why did I do that? That's why. So the eclipse path goes through kind of the middle of the U.S. or right across the U.S. and it's going through a lot more populated of an area. So especially in Texas, it's going to be going, right near San Antonio and Austin and Dallas, Fort Worth metro area. I mean, there's millions of people, over 10 million people that live in or near this corridor. And then Houston's another several million people right here. So it's a fairly populated area. So the good, there's pros and cons to it. The pro is the freeways are a lot bigger, especially in Texas. Not outside the cities necessarily, but in the city. So hopefully the extra people coming into the area will be easy. It'll accommodate it because the freeways are used to the locals, millions of locals, traveling around every day. But it's something to still be aware of, because I could see it also traffic being really bad, and especially some of the other areas as you get to the northeast. It's going to be going through some areas with maybe not as many people, but it's definitely, if you're near those parts, you should definitely kind of give enough time in case there's traffic. So so I'm going to be like kind of looking at, this general path, but then the biggest thing, like in 2017, was the weather. And so I'm going to be, especially in that last week, once you start getting 10 days out and the long range forecast starts kind of firming up, and then you start getting down to, that 5 day, 4 day forecast, those start to be more accurate. That's when I start having to kind of make decisions about where I'm going to go. I'm willing to drive just about anywhere along the path within the U.S., but basically, I'm going to be looking at the weather. And then this website, which I've mentioned a while back, maybe weeks ago, astrospheric, astrospheric, astrospheric. Yeah, it basically is kind of an astronomy oriented weather tool where it doesn't just go into like, is it cloudy? It's like, how clear is it? So you can see on this particular one for my location, you can see that on Sunday there's some clearing. The blue is clearing. So I'm going to be looking at that and the weather to kind of get a handle on it. The other thing that I'm going to be kind of thinking about is, sorry. So the other thing I'm going to be thinking about is the traffic. Well, I already mentioned that, but there's the traffic of just getting there, making sure you get to the point you want to be for the eclipse. But then there's that's fine. But then, like what happened in 2017, people didn't even wait for the partial phases to end. Basically, after, it's kind of like going to a football game and people just like leave immediately, as soon as it's over. Basically, for a lot of people, that eclipse was over when totality was over, or soon afterwards. And so a lot of people started taking off. And I just ran across this article for from just a few days ago, a couple weeks ago, but basically saying traffic could be snarled for a long period of time. And I guess the data backs it up that it wasn't so much before the eclipse, it was after the eclipse that things got like a lot of traffic. Because a lot of people kind of arrived, over time, but then they all left at once. And I think it will be kind of generally over time, people will arrive because the eclipse is on Monday. So I think people are going to be kind of getting to where they need to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday before the eclipse. Especially if they were able to luck out and get hotels, or if they have friends or family that they're staying with, near on the center line or on the center path, on the path of totality. So something to be aware of. Make sure you give plenty of time and have patience. And if you're in a position where, if you're in a city where you can spend some extra time, kind of like how we stayed the extra night in Casper, Wyoming, and then by the time we left, everything was fine. It'll be less stressful, but that's also something that kind of, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but, kind of balancing the desire to get home versus sitting in traffic for long periods of time with, kids or other family. So basically that's kind of in a nutshell, that my plan. It's not, like I say, it's the gear I already covered in some previous videos. I'm going to be bringing all my gear in the back of the vehicle, and then I'm going to be traveling with like my family, kind of my close family, and yeah, it's just basically flexibility, playing it by ear, and making sure you give plenty of time to get there, and then when it comes time to leave, you make sure you have plenty of time and don't rush it, because you might be going nowhere, especially if you're in Dallas, for example, and like several million people are leaving at once. The traffic's going to be really, really bad. But yeah, that's kind of my plan. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments. I'm always I'm trying to I try to do better every eclipse. And plus, then you can share information with others if you have other experiences or other plans that people might be of interest to people. And if you're watching this video afterwards, I'm going to add some descriptions afterwards, and I'll have like an on-screen display with some other videos you might want to watch. So I think that's all I have for today. So thank you for watching. This was nice and short and to the point. I'll probably do one or two more videos about the eclipse, because I'm kind of like obsessed about it. But that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching.